Hi everyone, Bonnie Violet here, a queer chaplain. And in case you don't know where you are at Dragon Spirituality. This is actually Faith, Hope, and Justice, Drag Spirituality and Trans Spirit series in collaboration with Glide Memorial Church and the Glide Pride team. This is actually our 6th episode and final episode of the series. I'm really excited for our guest this evening. Before we go there, I would just give you a little bit more of a landscape, if you will. This is a space in which it's kind of like a drag show meets a spiritual conversation. So you're welcome to tip Honey along the way. You'll see her Venmo as well as like Facebook, Instagram along the way. So feel free to connect with her and support her in that way as well along throughout the show. Also feel free to ask questions. I'll do my best we'll do our best to respond to every question that comes in tonight. And also take a moment and if you can, share. Thank you, Perry. Thanks for saying I look amazing tonight. Also, take a moment and share this stream to your friends or on your socials so we can bring more folks into the conversation who can hear about our amazing guest this evening. And I think that's all I needed to kind of get out for now. So I'll introduce our guest. So activist, politico, and drag queen, Honey Mahogany is a San Francisco native and a social worker by training who received her master's in social welfare from UC Berkeley. Currently serving as the 3rd vice chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, Honey is also co-founder of the Transgender Cultural District, a co-owner of the Stud Bar, and currently works as a legislative aide in San Francisco. Honey's work has earned her recognition from City of San Francisco and the state of California, Sainthood from the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, and awards from Harvey Milk Club, SF Young Democrats, SF Women's Political Committee, and the Women's Foundation of California. MX Mohagany has been featured in the Stonewall 50 Queerty's list of advocates continuing the legacy of Stonewall, and appeared twice in Out Magazine's Out 100, a yearly list of the 100 most impactful and influential LGBTQ people in the world. And here, everyone, is Honey Mahogany.
Hello.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Super busy season, huh, with Pride?
Oh my God, not just Pride, girl. It is Pride, but on top of that, it is the budget season for the city of San Francisco. So we are in hearings all day, and it is also fundraising season for the San Francisco Democratic Party. So there's just been a little too, it's also my partner's birthday, our anniversary.
Oh, congratulations.
So thank you. There's just so much going on this month. June it's the solstice. Happy solstice.
Right. No time for sleep.
No time for sleep, no rest for the wicked.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show this evening. I usually like to start by hearing a little bit about people's childhood. And you can feel free just to share what you like, talking about what it was like being a child and maybe how spirituality or even drag was a part of that, if it was.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, you look stunning tonight. It is night, right? It's still bright out, but it's summer.
I know, right?
Yeah, you look stunning. I grew up here in San Francisco, and my parents are from Ethiopia. They came here as political asylees. I grew up in a very Christian household, and Ethiopia has a very long history of Christianity, which predates actually Europe. Orthodox Christianity, my dad's family is Orthodox Christian. My mom's family is actually Catholic. And grew up with, within a very religious household, went to church every Sunday, went to Catholic school, K through 12, God and faith were very much a part of everyday life. And I found comfort in that. I mean, I think that there was obviously a little bit of discomfort because, I had these inclinations and feelings that I knew were at odds with the teachings of my church and the things that I was hearing both at home and at school and, again, in the church. And so that part was tricky. But I think the thing that I really took away from it, and the thing that I think was most ingrained with me, was a sense of, being a person for others and, treating others as we want to be treated, and, that we are, in fact, our brothers and sisters keepers. And that is, I think, this message of love and justice and kindness, I think, is really what kind of came through all of that. And it also, I think, worked along the lines of, the environment in which I grew up in, growing up in San Francisco and being a part of this incredibly diverse city where there were so many immigrants, and being, from a family of immigrants myself in a neighborhood that was very much, there were a lot of immigrants in the Sunset where I grew up. Specifically from, AAPI communities. Mm-hmm. And so just really valuing that diversity, whether it came to race or religion and, eventually like sexual orientation and gender identity, was key, I think, for me growing up. And that also played into the spirituality because, one of the things that we learn in the church is that you're not supposed to judge others, and, nobody's perfect. And so, let he without or she without sin cast the first stone. So right. I think that a lot of my, drive for social justice and understanding of the world did actually come from those early religious teachings. And I kind of, it in fact made me really question some of the other teachings like homophobia and misogyny that I think are ingrained in a lot of the Abrahamic religions, I guess I can say for sure. Mm-hmm. That those parts of the teachings were sort of at odds with these other sort of more like all-encompassing teachings of, God is love, and, don't judge others, and that, we're all brothers and sisters in this fight, in this life. Mm-hmm. So, that was that's kind of a rough overall sort of picture of my childhood upbringing within the church.
Oh, that's fantastic. You covered a lot of bases. Thanks so much for that. And so at some point in time, it sounded like there was maybe some conflict with the religion that you grew up with. Did you end up needing to leave, or did you just?
I guess I was like in college, I was, again, very sort of in it. I was, an altar boy back in the day. And, even when I went to college and I went out of town for college, I was still really involved in like our campus ministry center, mm-hmm. and did a lot of interfaith stuff between actually the Catholic Center and the Shalom Center, which was sort of where they had like a synagogue and like a Jewish community. We actually worked a lot together and did interfaith events and had dialogues and worked together on things. And so spirituality remained a part of my life. I mean, mm-hmm. even in college. But I think it was, I think there was a lot of pushback, specifically when, Cardinal Ratzinger became Pope Benedict. And there was a lot of sort of like, well, there were the cover-ups around the child sex abuse scandals. Mm-hmm. And then there was also this like really, I think, homophobic rhetoric coming out from the head of the church, and many people high up in the church, and sort of scapegoating homosexuality and equating that with child sex abuse when it wasn't necessarily, the two aren't necessarily connected, right? We know that.
Right.
And so I just found myself being really disgusted by that, and, kind of pushing myself away from the church as an institution that's really fallible, specifically the Catholic Church. And, really sort of turned inward and kind of figured out ways in which I didn't need the church, and was able to sort of pursue my spirituality and be more open and try different things, and, have a more sort of generalized faith and spirituality versus a religion.
Yeah.
And, I don't at all, I don't think I knock religion at all. I think that religion is super important for many people. And, I find myself sometimes missing it and really enjoying being in services when I am in services, whether it be of, Catholic services or, a service at Glide or somewhere else. Really missing that sort of sense of community and music. Music was a big part of it for me too. But I'm not as connected as I used to be. I do think about if I become a parent at some point, would I want to be more engaged in a spiritual practice just to pass on some of that to my potential children.
Right.
And even just to like be more involved in a community, because not that I need to be more involved in more things, but I do think that there is, I think that religion and churches are really big ways in which people develop meaningful ties to community, especially for folks who maybe otherwise feel marginalized. And so, there's a part of me that misses it, or maybe thinks about ways in which I could bring that back into my life again. But I have distanced myself a bit over the years.
Community is so important, and it seems like I think a lot of queer folks, we end up kind of finding our own churches and our own community in places that might not be temples. They might be bars and clubs, or wherever else we can I guess hang out and like just I think lift each other's spirits. That's why I started to do this thing back in 2014. Before I ever even did drag, I saw drag queens as kind of the spiritual leaders of our community, because they're the ones that are visible. They're the ones that are taking all the heat. They're the ones that are bringing joy. They're raising money. You know what I mean? And to me, that's what church is all about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the bars definitely became my church for a while. And, I think that is a queer tradition, as you said. I think that when queer people were very much queer, trans, were very much rejected from not just their families, but their churches and their communities, they had to rebuild those communities in the only place that was where they could be themselves, which was at the bar behind closed doors, where they were amongst others like themselves, and could, again, like as a community that was, oppressed and, sort of shunned, being able to connect with folks who are like you and build community that way was incredibly powerful and meaningful, and still is to this day. So many people still come to the US and to San Francisco in particular, fleeing persecution, hoping to be able to find themselves and be themselves. And many of the way in which many of those folks first connect with people is still at a bar. And so, bars are, I think, incredibly important places specifically to the LGBT community, and definitely hold a lot of power and spirituality. And I think that also leads to, what we're talking about, which is drag, because I think that drag within those spaces does take on a spiritual power that is very tangible, I think, for people, and inspiring, and people are uplifted by it, and I think it's like a good sermon. It delivers a message. It's inspiring. It's entertaining, and it brings people together.
Yeah. And when did drag come into your life?
I first did drag for a friend's film. It was in college. I think it was my sophomore year. And my friend Rue Sommer was in the film program at my undergrad at the University of Southern California. And, he was like, oh, I think I want you to do this role for me, because I think you're the only guy that I know that would look good as a girl. And so I did it, and it was super fun. And I got to wear my roommate at the time's clothes, and it was super basic. But, looking back on that film, actually, I don't know, it was very unclear on whether that character was a drag queen or trans. Maybe they were more trans. And so for me, it was also just very what's the word? I guess a prescient moment. It was, kind of, I'm looking for a certain word, but basically I think it was showing me a little piece of my future. It was just like a little sneak peek. And so that was my intro. And then I did drag a couple more times in college. And that's actually how I ended up coming out to my family, which again was also part of the script of that first film. So again, like very
and coming out as
queer first. And you know, my family found out because, you know, I had some sort of like Flickster account or something, and I had pictures in there of me dressed in drag amongst other pictures, and one of my cousins ended up forwarding it to members of my family. And so that's how I wouldn't come out, I was outed. But I think it kind of happened in a way that was just sort of poetic. I mean, it was definitely traumatic at the time, and you know, but also like, I think kind of powerful. And you know, I survived it, and I think I learned a lot from it. And I think, you know, as much in life, like sometimes I think we learn our best lessons from some of our darkest and hardest moments. So that definitely was the case there.
Right. How do you feel that drag had impacted your, I guess, journey of understanding your gender?
Well, again, like, you know, things sort of like looking at, you know, foretelling the future. When I first started doing drag, I think people were just like, first of all, this was way before RuPaul's Drag Race. So there was no like drag aesthetic that was sort of established that people like looked to be like, this is the definition of drag. And specifically in San Francisco, people were doing all sorts of different types of drag and very little what we call pretty drag. And so, you know, I grew up in Soma seeing things like, you know, going to the Stud and going to, you know, a bar called Truck, which is no longer there now. And just seeing very like what I would call, I guess, like sort of typical Soma gutter drag. I was very ramshackles and all about sort of like, you know, creating a scene and being messy and being funny and fun. And I came in, and I think I was just, you know, very pretty and sort of like very looking less like a drag queen and more like a trans person, perhaps. And I remember being, you know, backstage at one thing, and I was telling someone, you know, that they were asking about, you know, where I was living, and I was like, well, you know, I'm in a transition, and I'm, you know, kind of going between, you know, moving. I was at grad school in Berkeley at the time, or leaving grad school, and I was moving back to San Francisco. But I later on found out that they thought that I had said that I meant that I was transitioning and that I was, you know, on hormones. And then so the next time I came to the show, I just remember people being like, oh, like, congratulations. And I was like, for what?
Right.
And then there were, you know, other people, like, I don't know if folks know Jupiter Knows, who's just like, I think such a goddess and such a, you know, wonderful spirit, who always used to come up to me and tell me like, you know, girl, are you pickling? And I was just like, what does that even mean? And she's like, you know, pickling, are you on the juice? And I was like, I know, you know, I don't do drugs. And she was like, no, I mean the hormones. Yeah. And I was like, oh no. But, you know, there were all these moments in my life, her and, you know, gosh, a couple of other just like elders in the community who were just always like, oh, you know, have you ever thought about it? You know, I think that might work for you. And I hadn't, but then, you know, I reached a point in my life where I was like, oh, like, I guess this is true for me. And I do think it's because, I don't know, it might have happened without drag, but I definitely think drag made it easier in a variety of ways. I got to play around with it more, you know, in a way that was sort of like out in the open, and I got to learn a lot from other queens and trans women, and be around other queens and trans women and people who were in between. And gosh, just so many little moments of like figuring out when other drag queens were realizing that they were trans. Like there was one moment I remember when I was backstage at the Stud, and I won't say who this was, but it was a person who was sort of someone in the nightlife scene who was, a drag queen, and, eventually ended up coming out as trans many, many years later, maybe like a decade later. But when I saw her that night, it was the first time I had met her. And I saw her in the corner, and I remember saying, like, she started talking to me, and I was like, oh, I thought you were a girl at first. And, one of those awkward things that people say before we knew how to talk about gender or anything like that. And she was like, well, I am. But, again, like, she was not actually out as trans at that time. I think it was just like, it was like a subconscious moment. And I think that oftentimes in those environments, where maybe our guard is down in a certain way, where we have community members where we feel safe, we can have moments where we have those realizations, and where we're like, oh, well, this makes sense.
Yeah, I really relate to a lot of that. When I first started doing drag too, I felt like I was obviously experiencing drag, I think, a little differently than most of the girls around me. Like, I don't know, I just felt like I just felt so connected to it. And I also had people that were like, hey, if you want to just soften up a little bit, when I was a bearded lady. But we do have a question from Perry. Perry asks, where in your spiritual practice have you found space for healing?
Where have I found space for healing? Gosh, I could probably use some space for healing. I'm not very good at making space. I mean, I know that's not, it's not funny, but I don't know that I don't oftentimes take time to stop. And I don't know that I find, when I do, I don't know that I find that in spirituality. I mean, again, like some of it, like when I go to mass, when I have gone to mass for various things or been in spiritual spaces, like it is a little bit like riding a bike, and you can kind of like hop back into it. But it's not something that I seek out. I will say that I guess I have, like, in many points in my life, like I've had conversations with the universe, which I, feel like are spiritual moments for me when I'm looking for direction. And the universe talks back all the time. Right. I remember right around my Saturn's return, just sort of like being done with, or just, I was done with grad school and I was working full time, but I was also doing drag a lot. I was doing drag like 5 times a week or something like that. And it was exhausting, but I loved it. And I needed to figure out what direction my life was going to take me. And I remember just being open to the universe and being like, okay, well, should I be performing? Should I be doing social work? Give me some sort of direction here. Like, I need to figure out like where I need to be investing more time. And I kid you not, within like 2 to 3 weeks, I was reached out to by producers from RuPaul's Drag Race, producers from America's Got Talent, and producers from the X Factor, and made it onto 2 of those shows. So like it kind of like, yeah. So I've had moments like that where I think that, have helped sort of guide me. I don't know that it was necessarily healing, but it definitely like directed me in it took me to a certain place. I mean, even when I was like double eliminated on RuPaul's Drag Race, I remember being on that stage and kind of praying and being like, universe, God, goddess, whomever, like, if this is what I'm supposed to do, then let me continue. But if there's other better things for me, like I am kind of just sort of like open myself, like leave it up to you. Like you know best. So show me the way. And then I was double eliminated. So it was a very clear answer. It's not always something that I think you're wanting necessarily, but I think if you're open to it, like I think it can definitely take you places. And that it has for me, and I look at where my life is now, and I think that I'm much happier doing what I am now, even as exhausted as I am, even as crazy as things have gotten for me, than I would have been if I, had really continued to pursue the RuPaul's Drag Race track.
Mm-hmm. Would you say that your work helps you with your healing process?
Yeah. I mean, I think my work is incredibly rewarding. I mean, it's so hard and difficult, but I think most things that are rewarding are, Like being a parent. Like being a parent is not easy, but I think most people would say that it's rewarding. Yeah. And so I find a lot of joy in my work, in my ability to connect with, not just my community, but many communities that are, in fact, a part of my community in one way or another. I find that I do find that healing, and in figuring out that most of us have more in common than not, and that many of us have the same goals, even if we think we may have different routes to get there, and that part has been healing. Although there's been a lot of toxicity in there too, so it is a little bit you got to take the good with the bad sometimes. Can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So yeah, I think what I have found most healing most recently is really sort of like taking time to reconnect with nature. I feel like that's a very millennial thing to say, but and not even millennial, but like, a very human thing to say, in that, like, I really enjoy my little patio garden, and I, dream about being able to escape to the countryside and have a cabin in the woods with, a little cottage garden or something that I can tend to. It's like my ideal retirement scenario, and somehow also like be close enough where I could come to the city and still be with my friends and family.
Yeah. I'm gonna play like a little 30-second clip, take a little break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
And we're back. Folks, if you have questions, please do put them in the comments now. Now is a really great time to ask questions. I have to admit, I didn't realize how much you've like done and accomplished. I didn't realize you were a singer for some reason. I enjoyed listening to a lot of your music, and there are a lot of different facets of yourself. What are the things do you think that you're most proud of, or
I guess that would be, well, I mean, I would say that I'm most proud of the trans district for sure. I mean, I think that's I talk about this with Aria all the time. I'm like, well, that was pretty cool. Like, are we ever going to do anything this cool ever again?
Right.
It's not every day you help found a district. But it, and I say that, it was many of us who did it, and like it was definitely a community driven initiative, but it's so powerful, and I think under Aria's leadership specifically has grown so much, and I think is growing into our wildest dreams, or what we had dreamed it would be. So that is definitely the proudest thing that I've done, and hopefully it will be have a lasting impact on not just our community, but the city of San Francisco.
And do you still do a lot of drag now?
Do I still do a lot of drag now? Occasionally. It's very rare these days, although I've done it a couple times already this month because Pride, but not as much. I mean, at the height of it, I was doing drag probably 3, 4, or 5 days a week. And then now I don't have the time. I think I may actually end up hosting RuPaul's Drag Race viewing parties starting this Thursday. We're going to give it a trial run at the Lookout and then see how that goes. And if I can manage it, I may end up making it a fundraiser for the San Francisco Democratic Party, because that is something that I need to be doing all the time. And so, I'm finding ways to incorporate it into the stuff that I do when I can.
Fantastic. And you recently were you recently, why am I messing up with my words?
It happens sometimes when you're talking for a while, it's just like.
I know, right? But you recently were elected to a position with the Democratic Party, correct?
Yes. So I am. So in my bio needs to be updated because, well, I think when I sent it over, I was still third vice chair, but I'm now
Yeah.
chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, which was an internal vote. But we were all elected to our seats by the public in March. The Democratic Party. Is made up of representatives that the public votes on, and then it also includes, what we call ex officios, or people who are elected to sort of statewide or federal office. So people like Scott Wiener, David Chu, Phil Ting, Nancy Pelosi, Dianne Feinstein, the Lieutenant Governor Kounalakis, Jackie Spear, many other folk. I think those are all the ex officios. So them, and then all the folks that were elected by the people of San Francisco, specifically to this seat. And then they all vote on who their chair is. And so I was elected as chair.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
And it was another first, yes?
Yes, first Black person to be chair of the San Francisco Democratic Party, and first trans person in the country to be appointed or to be chair of a Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, you participate in a lot of firsts. It's really fantastic.
It's funny because I know a lot of trans people don't talk about their birth names, but my parents named me Alpha, so I just feel like that there's a lot of, I don't know, just juju or whatever you want to call it. But no, I'm very proud to be able to fill that role. I think it's I definitely am building on the work that has been done by generations of people before me. And we are at a moment in history, I think, and a moment in this country's history where, we are ready, I think, to have trans people take the lead and take leadership and, have a greater understanding of gender and gender identity and intersectionality and all of those things and race. And so, I'm proud of the work that we have all done so that I can continue to do this.
Yeah. Perry has a question. What advice would you give to young activists?
What advice would I give to young activists? There's so much. I think it kind of, I'm like trying to figure out what exactly I would say. I think, just keep going is the most important thing, because I think that, but also take time for yourself. This is the advice that I should give to myself because I never take it. But I think I admire those folks who and try to make promises to myself to take more time for myself and take time to recharge, and so that you can continue doing the work, because the work can be exhausting sometimes and is oftentimes thankless. And so that's what I would say is try and take time for yourself, but also I think just keep going, because it's not always easy. I forget who's, there's that saying that progress is made, progress isn't like a smooth or, straight road. It's sort of like flipping over like a brick, like you kind of advance in like these sort of like
weird shapes,
weird sort of like slow, you like all of a sudden you sort of hop forward, and then you don't move for a while, and you hop forward. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of labor. And I just, I think people just need to remember that, change will eventually happen. I think that putting that positive energy out there, consistently believing in your movement, and bringing people into the movement, I think, takes time and energy, but in the end, it's worth it.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that the universe does for us too, is it gives us opportunities to tell people what we need to hear. I know I often find myself telling people, and I'm like, oh girl, you could probably do that yourself, Right. And so what's next for you?
Well, who knows? I currently work in the District 6 office of Supervisor Matt Haney. I would, love the opportunity to be able to run for the District 6 seat. I feel like we've been able to do such great work while here, especially in the Tenderloin, but also in Soma and Treasure Island and, other parts of District 6. And I I would love to be able to see that work continue. So that is something that I have thought about a lot, and I'm at this point talking publicly about my intention to run when Matt is done with here serving as supervisor. But I'm not sure exactly when that will be. He could potentially be there for another 5 years, so might be a while, and things might change.
And politics wasn't something you initially set out to do, is that correct?
No, I did not want to be in politics. Well, I shouldn't say that. I never thought about being in politics. It wasn't something that I grew up thinking that I wanted to be, mayor or president or anything like that. But I find it to be an effective means to an end. I mean, I got involved, I'm trained as a social worker. And a lot of the work that I've done has been really about trying to be that person of others, going back to sort of that childhood, teachings and values that I've carried forward, and helping my community. And I found that a really effective way to do that is to build relationships with local government and, be politically active and involved and help shape policy. And well, it started with, building relationships with your local government officials, and then, helping educate people on what to vote for so that we can create positive change. And then it was like, okay, well then how do we write, even better initiatives, and, and then how do we get people elected, and and then it became, then before you know it, you're involved in politics. And then before you know it, you're, running yourself, because, I do believe in being the change you want to see in the world. And so I think I think also, for me, there's been a tremendous amount of, gosh, I guess for me, I feel like I have a duty, because I feel like there's, I've been given certain advantages and, privileges, or, worked hard to get, all of these things. I think all of us have privilege, right? In different ways. Certain people have more, certain people have different kinds, but we all have skills that we bring to the table that, we can use to and I think have a duty to leverage. And so for myself, I've been given this platform, and, I've been given this, was able to get an education and do all these different things. And so if I can bring all of these experiences and all this education and all of these things together, to create change, then, I want to do that. And so that's why I continue to sort of pursue this and run for office and do these things. And I'll continue to do them as long as I feel like I can be useful. I may come to a point where I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like, I don't know how much more useful I can be to the movement, or to, or I'm tired and need to take a break. But right now I'm going to take advantage of all the opportunities I have right now to do that.
Yeah, I think oftentimes community folks, politics kind of chooses you. You know what I mean? It just kind of, like you said, it kind of becomes part of a responsibility once you get a certain amount of visibility, or you get seen in a certain way. It just kind of naturally comes, especially if you're in a marginalized group of people or whatever. I think it's, it just kind of calls us to do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And would you call that spiritual?
I mean, I guess you could. It all to me is just, I think that there is a spiritual thread to it for sure. I mean, when you talk about being called,
well, it seems like it's a value to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is it a value that you hold to give back, or to?
Yes. I mean, for me, it's about giving back and being able to, and also all the things I talked about, using again, what privileges I've been afforded, and what achievements I have to sort of leverage those to create change, and to, again, be a person for others. And all of those things, I think, have led me to this place. And so some of that is based in spirituality, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for, is there anything else you would like to share with us this evening that you didn't get a chance to?
Well, I hope everyone has a happy Pride. I don't know what people's Pride plans are, but I am going to be hosting on Pride Sunday at the Stern Grove Festival. And so I'm super excited for that. I think Perfume Genius, Madame Gandhi, and there are other performers as well. I'm going to perform, I think, too. So I'm excited for that. But, regardless of what you do, whether you're going to Juanita Moore's Pride Party, which I know is also a very popular one and raises, she's raised over $1 million for charity through that party. And there's just so many events going on. I just hope that everyone is able to be safe and celebrate finally now that as we're exiting this pandemic, and be able to share in community together. So, have fun.
Yes, indeed. Well, I just want to say thank you for joining us this evening and everything that you do in the community. So thank you so much. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. I think that's it. I don't know. I feel like there's more to say, but I'm not in it tonight. I'm not, for whatever reason. I apologize. But thanks everyone for joining us this evening. As I said, this was the final episode of this series. If you're curious to watch the previous interviews with folks, you can just check out the links in the description. If you're listening to us on a podcast, you can also find those in the links in the description as well. So take care, have a great Pride, and bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Just gonna be me, gonna be free, gonna love who I love. That's just how it's gonna be. Oh.